Story number one. Nights on the highway always felt like time stood still. Cars came and went, their headlights slicing through the fog like lazy fireflies. But the world beyond the booth never really seemed to move. The hum of the generator, the soft rattle of coins, the faint smell of gasoline. They all blended into a kind of rhythm that only night shift workers knew. I worked the toll booth on a stretch of road that barely saw traffic after midnight. Two lanes in each direction, surrounded by trees so thick you could almost forget the rest of the world existed. My booth was one of three, but the others stayed dark most nights. It was just me, a thermos of coffee, and the occasional trucker rolling through. That night started like any other. Quiet, empty, unremarkable. Around 2:45 a.m., the fog was so dense I could barely see 10 feet beyond my window. The cameras mounted above the lanes flickered occasionally, static breaking across the small black and white monitor by my elbow. I'd stopped paying much attention to them years ago. At exactly 3:07 a.m., a car approached. I heard it before I saw it, that low hum of tires on asphalt cutting through the fog. A dark sedan pulled up, the kind that looks ordinary until you notice how spotless it is. The window slid down halfway, and a pale hand reached out, holding a $5 bill. I took it without thinking, dropped it in the tray, hit the button to raise the barrier. The headlights cut through the mist for a moment, then disappeared into the night. It was all routine, except when I glanced down at the monitor, the lane's camera showed nothing. The car didn't appear at all. I frowned, tapped the screen. Static. Every other camera feed was fine. Only lane 2, the one I was manning, was blank. I logged the time and vehicle type, like protocol required, then shrugged it off as a technical glitch. 15 minutes later, it happened again. Same hum of tires, same slow roll up to the booth. A dark sedan, identical to the last one. The window lowered halfway and the same pale hand reached out, holding another $5 bill. Something in me froze. The hand was shaking slightly this time, like it was cold. I leaned forward, trying to catch a glimpse of the driver's face, but the interior was pitch black. No dashboard lights, no movement, nothing. I could barely even make out a shape behind the wheel. "Long night?" I said, forcing a chuckle. My voice sounded too loud in the quiet. No response. The hand stayed still, waiting. I took the bill, nodded, and hit the button again. The barrier lifted. The sedan rolled through the fog and vanished like smoke. I stared at the monitor again. Still no car. The system had registered the toll payment, but the screen showed only an empty lane, undisturbed fog, and the faint shimmer of light from my booth. That's when the unease really started to creep in. I reached for the radio and called the next booth operator 5 miles down the highway. Nobody answered. Not unusual at that hour, but still enough to tighten the knot in my stomach. I made another note in the logbook. 3:22 a.m., same vehicle. Payment accepted. No camera record. At 3:37, I heard it again. Tires on asphalt. I didn't even look up this time. Just stared straight at the monitor, waiting to see what it would show. The dark sedan appeared out of the fog, slowing to a stop. The hand extended, same as before, pale, trembling, holding another $5 bill. But now I noticed something that made my chest tighten. The bill was damp. Not rain damp. More like it had been soaked and dried again, wrinkled and soft. I hesitated before taking it. The hand stayed still, patient, like it knew I would. I reached out and felt the chill radiating from that skin. The kind of cold that feels wrong, like touching metal in winter. I took the bill, hit the barrier switch. This time, before the sedan could roll forward, I leaned toward the open window and asked if they were okay since they had been there twice by now. Nothing. Not a word. The hand withdrew, the window rolled up, and the car drifted forward into the fog. The camera feed stayed blank. That was when I did something stupid. I left the booth. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the lane, waving it through the fog in the direction the car had gone. The beam cut across the road, catching nothing but mist. No tire tracks, no taillights. I walked a few steps forward, my breath frosting in the air, despite it not being cold enough for that. The silence was heavy, not just quiet, but thick, like the whole world had paused. I turned back toward my booth and froze. The barrier was down again, and another $5 bill sat neatly in the tray. I hadn't heard a car. The booth monitor still showed static. When I got back inside, my hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped my flashlight. I logged the time again, 3:44 a.m. I kept staring at that money, wondering if I'd somehow missed a vehicle, even though I'd been standing right there. At 4 o'clock, I made another call to the supervisor on duty. Still no answer. I stared out at the fog for the rest of my shift, unable to shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that something was out there, circling back again and again, paying a toll for a road that didn't lead anywhere anymore. The next morning, when the day shift guy came in, I told him the story. He didn't laugh, just looked at me carefully and said, while nodding slowly, that I was not the first person to complain about it. Apparently, years ago, a car matching that exact description had gone off the bridge that used to stand just past our stretch of highway. It had plunged into the river during a foggy night. The driver was never recovered. No one knew what exactly had happened that night and whether the driver was alive or dead. I didn't go back after that week. The official report would have called it fatigue or stress, or maybe a glitch in the feed. But every now and then, when I drive past that stretch on my way to the city, I still glance at the booth in the fog. And sometimes, just sometimes, I swear I see the faint outline of a car waiting patiently for the barrier to rise. Story number 2. The clinic always felt too quiet at night. It was the kind of quiet that hums in your ears until you start imagining things. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and fur. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed just enough to keep you half awake. And every creak of the old building made you wonder if someone else was moving around. I'd been working the overnight shift at Greenridge Veterinary for about 6 months. The place was small, 2 exam rooms, 1 surgery suite, a kennel in the back for overnight stays, and a narrow office where I handled the paperwork. My job was simple: check on the animals, feed them, keep the place clean, and make sure nobody slipped away before morning. The first few weeks were uneventful. A few restless dogs, a cat that somehow kept unlatching her own cage. Normal stuff. But then it started. Every night at exactly 2:17 a.m., the animals would wake up. Not all at once. It started like a wave. A low whine from the kennels, then claws scraping at metal, tails thudding against the walls. Within seconds, every cage was alive with panic. Dogs barked and growled. Cats hissed and yowled. Even the older, sedated ones stirred like they were sensing something I couldn't. At first, I thought it was some noise from outside. A passing truck, maybe an air conditioner starting up. But I checked. Every time. And each night the pattern was the same. 2:17 on the dot. The vet, Dr. Allen, laughed it off when I mentioned it. He said that the animals had sensed my nervousness and that made them react. Maybe. He was right. But I wasn't nervous then. Not until it kept happening. One night I decided I'd get to the bottom of it. I set up the clinic's old CCTV feed. 6 grainy cameras covering the halls, the lobby, and the kennels. The footage stored on a local drive in the back office. I figured if something was spooking them, I'd see it. That night I kept my phone clock open beside me. When 2:16 hit, I held my breath. 2:17. The first bark came from the far left kennel. Max, a shepherd mix, recovering from surgery. Then came the rest. Dogs clawing, cats yowling, metal rattling. I stood up, flashlight in hand, heart pounding. But it wasn't just the noise. The lights dimmed, not off, just enough that everything took on that faint yellow tinge. And the air, it got colder. I could see my breath in front of me. I walked down the hallway toward the kennels, the sound building like a wave. The second I reached the door, everything stopped. Dead silence. I pushed the door open, the smell of disinfectant thick and sharp. Every animal stood rigid, eyes wide, bodies trembling, all staring toward the far corner of the room. There was nothing there, just a stack of spare cages, a mop bucket, and a shelf of cleaning supplies. Still, the feeling was wrong. I could feel the hair on my arms rise, my pulse hammering in my neck. I backed out slowly, not breaking eye contact with that corner. When I checked the CCTV the next morning, I almost convinced myself it would show nothing. But around 2:17, the footage from the kennel camera flickered. Once, twice, and for about 3 seconds, there was movement. something dark passing through the frame, too tall to be an animal, too fluid to be a shadow. It glided past the cages, and as it did, every animal lunged against the doors, barking and howling like they were trying to drive it away. Then it was gone. When I showed the clip to Dr. Allen the next day, the feed came blank. There was no movement, no noise. All the animals were sleeping, but the weird part is that after a while, it showed something. That made no sense. I had entered the room and stood at the far end of the corner. I don't even remember leaving my desk. After that, Dr. Allen suggested locking the kennel room every night before he left. Told me it would ease my nervousness. I didn't argue. I told myself not to go in there unless I had to. Still, the 217 chaos continued, only now it was muffled behind the locked door. The animals thrashed and howled every night like clockwork. It went on for weeks. Then one night it changed. 217 came and went. Nothing. Silence. No movement, no barking. I remember sitting at the desk, heart racing, waiting for the noise to erupt. But the minutes ticked by, and it stayed quiet. I almost felt relieved, until I noticed the smell. Not the usual antiseptic. This was sweet and sour, like rotting fruit or old blood. It came from the hallway leading to the kennels. I hesitated, then grabbed my flashlight and the spare keys. The beam cut through the dark as I approached the door slowly, still debating about going inside or not. My hands shook when I unlocked it. The kennels were calm, too calm. Every animal stood still, eyes fixed again on that far corner. The air felt heavy, almost buzzing with static. That's when I saw it. In the middle of the floor, directly beneath the camera's blind spot, the tiles were smeared with something dark. I knelt down, shining the light closer. It wasn't blood, at least not fresh. It was dried, cracked, like old stains that had been scrubbed away and somehow resurfaced. And there, half buried in the grout between two tiles, was a small metal tag. Rusted, worn. I pulled it out and turned it over. Benny! I froze. Benny had been a clinic dog, one of the rescues. He was recovering after a seizure attack. And then, one day he was not there. It was as if he had vanished into the thin air. I stood up fast, heart hammering in my chest. Every animal in the room started whining again. Low, mournful sounds, not fear this time, but something that felt closer to recognition. I dropped the tag, locked the room, and sat in the office until sunrise, every light on. Dr. Allen stopped doing overnight stays a week later, said it wasn't cost-effective. He moved the animals to a separate boarding facility. He never said why. I don't work there anymore. But some nights when I drive past the clinic around 2:15, the lights flicker inside. Just faintly, in sequence, like someone walking past each cage again, one by one. Story number 3. Most people think cemeteries sleep at night. I can tell you they don't. They breathe. They shift. And if you listen closely enough, you can hear the ground settle like something turning over beneath it. I used to think that was just my imagination until the night I found the coffin that shouldn't have been there. I've been the night groundskeeper at Harlow Hill Cemetery for almost 10 years. Small town, old land, the kind of place where gravestones tilt and the names fade to almost nothing. My job wasn't complicated. Keep an eye out for vandals, reset fallen flowers, log any signs of damage. The place had motion sensors and floodlights along the main paths. They were old, but they worked well enough. Or at least they did until that week. The first odd thing I noticed was the pattern. The motion lights would come on, one by one, in perfect sequence, starting near the gate and ending at the back section by the oak trees. It looked for all the world like someone was taking a slow walk through the cemetery, always following the same route, stopping at the same grave every time. The first few nights I thought it was just a stray animal triggering the sensors, maybe a fox, maybe a raccoon. But after the 5th night in a row, I decided to check for myself. It was early October, fog rolling low between the stones. The chill bit through my gloves as I walked, flashlight beam bouncing off marble and brass. Sure enough, at exactly 2:31 a.m., the first light blinked on near the gate, then the next, then the other one. Just like that, every light blinked, one by one. It was unnerving how evenly spaced they were. about 10 seconds between each, moving deeper into the cemetery, right toward Section D. I followed behind, keeping to the side so my own movement wouldn't interfere. The sequence continued, steady as a heartbeat, until the last light flared on, the one over a grave near the back fence. The name on the headstone read Evelyn Reeves, 1901 to 1972. Nothing strange about it. Flowers long dead, stone half covered in moss. But what made me pause was the ground in front of it. The soil looked uneven, not fresh but unsettled, as if it had been disturbed months ago and never properly compacted. I knelt down, brushing away leaves, running my hand over the dirt. It didn't feel right. The earth should have been solid, packed hard after 50 years. Instead, it gave slightly under my palm, like there was space beneath. I checked the records the next morning. Evelyn Reeves was buried in Section D, Plot 42, the same one I'd seen. But when I looked closer, the coordinates didn't match. The map showed her resting 20 feet to the left. The grave I'd stood over wasn't listed at all. I double-checked, thinking maybe it was an old mapping error. But no, the lot number didn't exist. There shouldn't have been anything buried where I'd seen that headstone. That night, I went back out to see if the lights would follow the same route. They did. Same time, same pace, same ending spot, right at the unlisted grave. This time I brought a shovel. It felt wrong, even as I pushed the blade into the dirt. There's an unspoken rule among groundskeepers. You don't disturb what's settled, but the records didn't lie. This grave wasn't supposed to exist, I had to know. The soil was soft, almost too soft. It turned up damp and dark, smelling faintly metallic, like old water pipes. About 2 feet down, the shovel hit something hollow. My stomach tightened. I crouched, sweeping away more dirt until a pale wooden surface appeared, rotted and cracked. It was definitely a coffin. I froze there staring at it, the air cold enough to sting my lungs. There was no plaque, no marker, nothing to say who it belonged to. Just warped wood and silence. I told myself to stop, to fill the hole, go back inside, pretend I'd never seen it. But curiosity has a way of eating through reason. I brushed more dirt off until I saw it. A small metal latch, rusted and loose. It wasn't sealed. The logical part of me said not to touch it. The other part, the part that needed answers, reached out anyway. The moment my fingers brushed the latch, every floodlight in the cemetery went out. The darkness slammed down like a weight. For a moment, I couldn't even see my own hands. The silence was absolute. No crickets, no wind, nothing. Then came the noise. Not a scream, not a voice. More like a deep, dragging breath rising from the open ground. The air felt thick, damp, suffocating. I stumbled back, flashlight shaking in my grip. And then, just as suddenly, the lights flicked back on. The coffin was gone. The hole was still there, but empty. Just dark, wet earth. The ground looked untouched, like I'd never dug it in the first place. My shovel lay a few feet away, half buried. I didn't stick around. The next morning, I told my supervisor what had happened. Well, part of it. I said the lights were malfunctioning, and I thought I'd found an old maintenance cavity. He nodded, made a note to call the city surveyor. A week later, I asked him if they found anything. He said they dug where I pointed. Found nothing. Not even disturbed soil. Just solid ground and roots. But that night, the motion lights started up again. Same sequence, same timing, same stop. And when I checked that spot again the next morning, there was something new resting on top of the grass. A single warped coffin handle, half buried in mud. The lot's still unlisted. I still have no record of that grave ever existing. But I've learned to keep the lights on and the shovel locked away. Because whatever's buried out there, or was, it doesn't want to be mapped. Story number 4. The thing about hotels after midnight is that they don't really sleep. They just pretend to. The lobby gets quiet, the lights dim, and everything looks peaceful. But underneath that calm, the building still breathes, creaks, and remembers. I used to think that was just ambience, until the night the calls from room 607 started coming in. I was the night auditor at the Westbridge Grand, an old business hotel tucked between 2 office towers downtown. 12 floors, 118 rooms, and a reputation for being quaintly haunted. The kind of thing tourists laughed about when booking online. I didn't believe any of it. After 3 years on the job, ghosts were the least of my worries. My shift was paperwork, balancing ledgers and drinking enough burnt coffee to make it till sunrise. It was a Tuesday, dead quiet. The night guard had just gone to check the service doors, and I was alone at the front desk, scrolling through the CCTV feeds just to stay awake. Around 2:20 a.m., the front phone rang. I glanced at the display. Room 607. We didn't have a guest in 607. It had been closed off for years after a small fire damaged the suite. The room was under renovation, but mostly just used for storage now. I hesitated a moment before picking up. There was silence on the other end. Then faintly a sound, not static, not a voice, but soft crying. A child's. It was so clear I actually lowered my voice, thinking maybe it was a prank call from one of the guests. I spoke again, but no answer. Just that quiet sobbing, rhythmic, like someone trying not to be heard. Then the line went dead. I checked the reservation system. No active key cards for 607, no access logs in weeks. I pulled up the security feed for the sixth-floor corridor. The hallway was empty, carpet lit by dim emergency lighting. The door to 607 was closed, no movement. I told myself it had to be a crossed line. That old PBX system was ancient. But as I went back to paperwork, something about that sound wouldn't leave me. At 3:11, the phone rang again. Same number, room 607. I answered immediately. This time no crying, just faint breathing, slow and uneven, like someone lying close to the receiver. I waited, pulse hammering in my ears. Then clear as anything, a child's voice. Can you tell her to stop knocking? The line went silent again before I could respond. I stared at the receiver for a long time before putting it down. I called maintenance and asked if anyone was working on the sixth floor, maybe checking pipes or wiring. They said no one had clearance at night. Still, I grabbed my flashlight and master key, told the guard on duty I was checking something upstairs. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. When the doors slid open, the hallway was bathed in that pale, humming half-light. My footsteps were the only sound. As I approached 607, I realized I could hear it, the faint tap, tap, tap of knuckles against wood. Not loud, not frantic, just steady, patient. I stopped a few feet away listening. The sound was definitely coming from inside. I called out, asking if anyone was there, but my voice came out hazy and shaky. The knocking stopped instantly. I felt a strange cold draft on my neck, even though the hallway was sealed. My hand hovered over the doorknob. Something in me wanted to turn back, but training and curiosity pushed harder. I slid the key card into the reader. It beeped red. Again. Red. But on the third try, it flashed green. The lock clicked open. I stepped inside and flicked the light switch. Nothing. The air was thick with that dusty, stale smell of old carpet. My flashlight beam cut through the dark, bouncing off stacked furniture and rolled-up rugs. The place looked like a storage unit more than a room. But what stopped me cold was the phone. It sat on the bedside table, the same line that had called me twice, the receiver slightly off the hook. I picked it up. Dead silence. Then faintly, I heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. But not from the door. It was coming from beneath the floorboards. I took a step back so fast I nearly tripped over an old lamp. The sound was muffled but deliberate, like someone trapped under the floor, trying to get out. 3 knocks, a pause, then 2 more. I didn't stay long enough to find out more. I locked the door behind me and went straight back to the lobby. The guard looked up when I came down, pale-faced. He looked at me, confused and worried. But there was something else. It was as if he knew about everything. I didn't say anything. We just sat there watching the minutes crawl toward morning. The next day I checked the old renovation logs. Room 607 had suffered smoke damage from a small electrical fire. No casualties. But buried deeper in the report was a note. Secondary subfloor inspection halted due to sealed compartment, original blueprints inconsistent. Apparently, no one had ever opened that compartment. The call stopped a week later, right after the hotel finally ripped up the carpets on the 6th floor. The workers found nothing unusual. No wiring, no loose ducts, no access points, just old wood, cracked from heat. I told myself that was the end of it. But sometimes when I'm on the desk late and the lobby gets too quiet, I hear it again through the walls. Soft, deliberate knocking. Always three and then two. I don't pick up the phone anymore when 607 flashes on the display. I just watch it ring until it stops. And every time it does, I swear I can still hear that small voice whisper somewhere close by. Can you tell her to stop knocking? Story number 5. There's something unsettling about talking into a microphone at 3 a.m. Your voice echoing out into the dark, reaching people you'll never see. Some nights I used to joke that I was broadcasting to ghosts. Then one night I realized I wasn't entirely wrong. I hosted the graveyard shift on 108.4 FM. 3 hours of classic rock, bad jokes, and the occasional drunk caller trying to request Nickelback ironically. The pay was garbage, but I liked the stillness of those hours. The world outside was quiet, the red on-air sign glowed like a heartbeat, and it almost felt like the booth existed outside of time. My producer, Carla, left at midnight. After that, it was just me until sunrise. I'd line up my playlists, sip my burnt vending machine coffee, and read dedications live on air. It was easy work, until the night I got the first call from him. It was around 2:40 a.m. when the phone line blinked. Private number. Nothing unusual. Most night callers hid their ID. I hit the cue button. 108.4, you're live on the graveyard shift. What's your request? The voice that answered was calm, polite, maybe too calm. The person on the other end asked if I could play Don't Fear the Reaper for Mark. There was a faint crackle on the line, like static or wind. I told them it was on cue while marking it down. Before hanging, I asked who Mark was. The caller said softly that Mark was with him and that he wanted to hear the song one more time. I chuckled nervously, and the call suddenly hung up before I could say anything else. I cued the song, figuring it was just someone trying to sound creepy for late-night kicks. But as the opening riff started, I swear I heard a faint voice whisper behind the music. Not in my headphones, not from the booth, but from the broadcast feed itself. It was hard to make out. Maybe my imagination, maybe not. The next morning, Carla came in early and asked me if I had gotten a prank call last night. According to a listener, my show replayed a dead guy's name last night. I instantly thought about that weird call. I laughed it off until she showed me the email. A woman claimed her brother, Mark Reynolds, had died due to an on-site accident just before midnight. The accident was all over the local news. I tried to shrug it off. Coincidence, right? But the voice on the phone, that faint background hiss, it gnawed at me. A few nights later, the same number blinked again. The same voice, calm, level, polite, telling me to play Hotel California. For Danny, I froze. Something about the way he said it. For Danny, like he was delivering last rites. I went along anyway. When the song ended, I tried to trace the call. The system showed nothing. No log, no trace, no number. It became a pattern. Always late, between 2:30 and 3 o'clock. Always a song for someone. Always someone who died that same night. By the 5th call, I'd stopped taking them live. I just let them record. Each time, the background noise grew louder. Faint, overlapping voices, like a dozen people murmuring in the distance. Then came the night the static stopped. It was a Thursday, quiet enough that I'd started reading weather updates just to fill airtime. Around 2:52, the private number flashed again. My stomach dropped. I hesitated, then answered. The voice was weaker this time, and then he said, almost in a faint whispering voice, that it was almost time, that it was my turn now. And then, the line went dead. I yanked off my headphones, heart pounding. I called Carla at home, woke her up, babbled about weird calls, dead names, bad pranks. She told me to log it and ignore it. Then the studio monitors crackled to life on their own. The channel was live. I hadn't cued anything. No mic open, no playlist running, but the feed was broadcasting. At first, just faint static. Then the same voice, steady and distant. This next one goes out to Jack Cooper. That's my name. My blood ran cold. The voice continued, calm as ever. Host of the graveyard shift, found dead in his studio. Cause of death undetermined. Time of discovery, 3:17 a.m. The speakers hissed again, then went silent. I ripped the power from the console. Everything went dark. For a few seconds, the only sound was my own breathing. Then the on-air light flickered back on by itself. I sat frozen, staring at it, too afraid to move. The rest of the night was a blur. I don't remember restarting the system. Don't remember signing off. Somehow I must have done both, because the next morning, the show logs were clean. No ghost broadcast, no missing time. I didn't tell Carla what the voice said. I couldn't. I expected something to happen after that. An accident, a malfunction, something that would explain it. But nothing did. I'm still here, still alive, still doing the same shift, though now I never leave the monitors on after 2:30. Sometimes, though, when I check the playback files, I find gaps. Exactly 30 seconds of silence in the middle of songs. And if I turn the volume up high enough under the static, there's always the same faint voice, but always overlapping with other multiple voices begging or pleading for mercy. Story number 6. You stop noticing how loud a factory is until it goes quiet. That's when every echo feels wrong, like the building is waiting for something to start again. That silence is where the real noise hides. I work as an overnight maintenance tech at Corvo Manufacturing. We make industrial mixers. Big, noisy things with blades that could grind up a bicycle if you're not careful. After midnight, the production floor is empty. All machines powered down except for the ones we run diagnostics on. My job was to fix what broke, log inspections, and keep the hum steady until the day crew arrived. That winter, we'd had a fatal accident on line 4. A mixer had jammed, and the operator made the mistake of reaching in before the lockout system engaged. They said it was quick, but none of us ever looked at that machine the same way again. After the investigation, they disconnected it completely. New unit on order, old one tagged and sealed. My boss even had me remove the fuses. Personally, I remember dropping them into my toolbox. A small act of finality. A week later, I started hearing it. I was checking the compressors around 1:30 a.m. when I caught the faint whirring of gears from across the floor. The unmistakable low mechanical churn of line 4's mixer. I froze. I knew that sound like my own heartbeat. It shouldn't have been possible. I went to check, and sure enough, the mixer was vibrating slightly. The pressure gauge twitching like it was pulling current, but the entire circuit was offline. Main switch locked, no power indicator. I tried to brush it off. Faulty sensor maybe. Electromagnetic bleed. This place was old. Half the wiring was pre-digital. But the sound came again the next night, same time, and again the night after. Always starting slow, the grind of metal turning against metal, then tapering off after a few minutes. By the 4th night, I brought my multimeter. The moment the noise began, I tested the lines. No current, 0 volts. Still, the machine was moving. The blades rotated just slightly, enough to clink against the housing. That's when I noticed something else. The safety light on top, the red one that flashes when the machine's active, was glowing faintly. Not steady, not bright, just a pulse, slow and irregular, like a heartbeat. I didn't report it right away. I logged the noise as a mechanical vibration anomaly and left it at that. But then came the night it called my name. I was repairing an air duct on the mezzanine when I heard it over the factory floor noise. A faint grinding voice, more mechanical than human, drawn out and metallic. At first I thought it was my radio, but it wasn't even on. I looked down, flashlight beam catching on line 4's mixer. The blades were slowly turning again, dry and grinding, as if scraping something unseen. And then I heard it again. This time the voice was coming from inside the mixer. I dropped the flashlight. It clattered down the metal stairs. For a second I thought I was losing it. Machines don't talk. Sound echoes, vibrations distort. Maybe air through the ductwork. Anything but that. Still, I climbed down, legs shaking. I walked over to the machine. It stopped the moment I got close. The blades were still, the red light off. Only the faint smell of burnt oil lingered in the air. And something else underneath. Something almost metallic and sweet. I checked the fuse box again. Empty, every circuit cold. The next morning, I told my boss we should have the whole line inspected again. He laughed, said maybe I was just tired. That night, he stayed late to humor me, sitting in his office while I did rounds. Nothing happened. He left around 1:45, slapping my shoulder and telling me to get more sleep. I almost believed him. Then at 2:07, the mixer started up again. This time louder. I ran toward it, the sound cutting through the factory. A full power spin, grinding like something heavy inside the chamber. The safety light was blazing red. The gauge maxed out. I hit the kill switch. Nothing. Pulled the emergency lever. Dead. The machine roared for another 10 seconds before suddenly stopping. The silence after was deafening. I opened the safety hatch with shaking hands. The inside was empty, spotless, freshly polished, as if it had never run. Except for one thing. In the drain channel at the bottom was a smear, thick, dark, and unmistakably blood. I staggered back, heart pounding. I called my supervisor at home, told him he needed to come now. When he arrived, the mixer was silent, the blood gone. I swear it was there. But he just looked at me with that polite, managerial pity. He ordered an inspection the next day. They found nothing wrong. But that night, during my shift, I found the fuses. They weren't in my toolbox where I'd left them. They were back in the panel, reinstalled, perfectly aligned, as if they'd never been removed. The label on the circuit box, on the one I'd written myself, now had something scrawled in grease pencil beneath my handwriting. The machine hasn't turned on again since. But sometimes when the factory gets quiet around 2 in the morning, I hear the faint metal whir starting up from across the floor. Slow, steady, patient. And I can't shake the feeling it's waiting for me to come back and finish what that operator started. Story number 7. People assume night dispatchers get used to hearing panic. You don't. You just learn how to keep your own voice steady while someone else's world is ending. But nothing trains you for the night you pick up a call from yourself. I've been an emergency dispatcher in a mid-sized city for 7 years. Night shift, 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. The building hums with quiet chaos, muted voices, glowing monitors, the constant ping of incoming calls. Some are routine, noise complaints, fender benders, drunks seeing UFOs. Then there are the ones that stick to you like oil. That week had been normal enough. A few minor fires, a domestic call that went south, and an overdose I couldn't forget. But early Thursday morning, right after 3 a.m., the system logged something strange, a phantom call. The timestamp was 3:09:14, flagged as call active, but my line had never rung. The display flickered once, then reset. No number, no address. I assumed it was a glitch. Happens all the time. Bad relay, old server. But when I opened the audio log out of habit, there was sound. Static. Then a woman's voice. Faint, strained, asking for help. I frowned, hit replay. The voice was soft, panicked, and familiar in a way that made my skin tighten. I turned up the volume. "Please," she whispered again, breathing ragged. "There's smoke. I can't get out." The timestamp matched the phantom entry exactly, 3:09 a.m. But the strangest part, the voice was mine. I played it again, slower this time. Every cadence, every tremor, every syllable was me. Not similar, identical. I stared at the waveform like it might explain itself. It didn't. I logged the anomaly, made a note to have tech check it in the morning, and told myself to shake it off. Long hours mess with your head. At 3:09 the next night, the same thing happened. No ring, no incoming number. Just a new entry blinking in the call log. The line had been active for 19 seconds. This time the audio started with coughing. Harsh, wet, desperate. Then came the voice again. "Please, someone. The fire." Then a crash, a choking sound, and the line went dead. When I checked the location coordinates embedded in the metadata, my stomach dropped. The call had pinged from my own home address. I double-checked the system. Sometimes GPS data bugs out, routes through old towers, misreads logs. But no, the system was accurate to within 3 meters. I lived in a small one-bedroom apartment on the south side, definitely not on fire. I sat there for a long time, watching the seconds tick on the monitor, feeling that slow crawl of unease build under my skin. When my supervisor came by for coffee, I didn't mention it. Being in the department meant you were supposed to act logical and rational. But this whole thing, it made no sense. It could never. No one would believe if I told them I got calls every night, listening to myself begging for help. By the third night, I was jumpy. Every tick of the clock felt too loud. I kept glancing at the timestamp corner, waiting for 3:09, and right on cue, the line lit up again. No caller ID, no ring, just active. I put on my headset, pulse hammering. At first, only static, then faint sobbing. Please, the voice rasped. My voice. She's still inside. She's still inside. Then a sound like shattering glass, followed by the shrill feedback of a collapsing line. The log blinked out. Duration, 34 seconds. This time, I didn't even breathe. I just sat there listening to the silence pressing in around me. After my shift, I drove home and checked every inch of my apartment. Nothing. No smoke, no smell, no faulty wiring. I even checked the smoke detectors. All fine. I told myself it was just exhaustion, hearing things, mixing up old recordings. But deep down, I knew my voice when I heard it. The fourth night, I asked another dispatcher, Mia, to listen with me. At 3:09, the log flickered again. We both watched it appear. Real time. Same blank data, same timestamp. I opened the playback file. Static. Then breathing. Mia leaned forward. And then, eyes wide, she looked at me while she quietly mouthed that it was me on the line. The recording was longer this time, 45 seconds. The voice kept calling for help, words breaking up between coughs. Then a faint alarm started in the background, a smoke detector. And before the clip ended, another voice, male, distant, said, "We've got one trapped inside. She's not moving." Then silence. When it stopped, Mia looked at me. We both knew it was a fire call. I nodded. My throat felt dry. The coordinates again pointed to my apartment. But this time, the metadata had a date stamp. Not the current night. 3 months ahead. I called the system techs the next morning. They found no trace of the files. Not even in the cache. Mia swore she heard them too. That's the only reason I didn't check myself into a hospital. It's been 6 weeks since then. Every night, I still take the 3 p.m., 3 a.m. shift. I can't bring myself to quit. The phantom calls haven't come back. Not yet. But I moved. I didn't tell anyone the new address, not even the department. And still, every time I check the logs near the end of my shift, I see the blank entry flicker at the bottom of the screen for half a second. 3:09 a.m. before it disappears. I tell myself it's nothing. A memory, a glitch, an echo in the system. But sometimes when the phones go quiet and the air feels heavy, I swear I can still hear her. My own voice, somewhere deep in the static, whispering for help. Story number 8. You don't realize how big a warehouse really is until you're the only one walking through it at night. Every echo sounds like footsteps. Every shadow looks like movement. And every minute feels twice as long. I used to joke that I was guarding ghosts. Until I saw myself on the monitor. I worked night security at a distribution warehouse just outside town. Massive place, almost 500,000 square feet of concrete, shelving and humming fluorescence. We handled everything from auto parts to electronics, so the company wanted 24-hour surveillance. My shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., just me, a radio, a thermos of bad coffee, and 30 cameras to watch. The system was new. Full high-def feeds, motion detection, automatic logging. Cameras rotated every 30 seconds, catching different zones. There were blind spots, sure, but I knew them all by heart. The weirdness started on a Thursday around 2 a.m. I was halfway through my patrol when I heard the radio crackle. Someone radioed in to report the status for Unit 2. That made no sense. I was Unit 2. We didn't have another. I grabbed my mic and asked who it was on the channel. No reply. Just a burst of static, then silence. When I got back to the control room, one of the camera feeds was flashing. Zone 9, the far end of the loading bay. Motion detected. The screen showed someone in uniform walking the floor. flashlight beam cutting across the crates. It was me. Same height, same stride, same reflective vest. The timestamp was live, and the figure moved exactly like I did. Half a second out of sync, I even raised my flashlight instinctively, and a split second later, he did too. I froze, watching as the other me turned toward the camera. The angle was grainy, but I could see enough. Same patch, same badge number. Then the feed glitched, one frame of static, and he was gone. I ran down there scanning the aisles. Nothing. No sound, no footprints, no open doors, just the faint buzz of the lights. I told myself it was a playback error, a buffer delay. Cameras desync all the time. Still, it stuck in my head. I double-checked the logs. No motion alerts before or after. The next night, it happened again, Zone 12 this time. I was watching the monitors when the feed flickered, and there he was again, walking the exact same patrol route, just a few steps behind the one I'd taken minutes earlier. But here's what made my blood run cold. The reflection in the metal shutter beside him. The reflection wasn't out of sync. It turned ahead of him, looking straight into the camera. I switched monitors, jumped back through the playback, but the footage stuttered like it was resisting the rewind. When I finally got a still frame, the face in the reflection wasn't quite mine. It looked like me, but pale, expressionless, and with eyes too dark to show any light. I didn't sleep that day. When I came back the next night, I convinced myself it was stress. Long shifts, isolation, caffeine overdose. They can do that. I was ready to laugh it off. But when I logged into the system, the previous night's footage was missing. Whole block of it. Zone 12, 1:40 to 1:50 a.m. Deleted. The system requires an admin code for that. I didn't have one. Around 3 a.m., I was making my rounds again when I heard something faint. A pair of footsteps behind me. Even rhythm. My pace exactly. I stopped. The sound stopped too. I spun around, flashlight cutting through rows of shelves. Nothing there. Then my radio came alive again. Just a whisper of static. Then again, the voice came through, warped and hollow, asking the status for Unit 2. I stood there frozen, radio trembling in my hand. A beat of silence. Then again. Same words, perfectly matched cadence. That was enough for me. I backed out of the aisle, keeping my light sweeping. My shift was nearly over anyway, so I locked down early and sat by the main door until sunrise. The next evening, the manager called me in before my shift. He looked uneasy. He asked if I knew how our system worked. I nodded. Obviously, I had been working for a long time. I knew everything by heart by now. He then turned the monitor toward me. It was footage from the previous night. Timestamp 2:14 a.m., Zone 3 near the entry doors. It showed me, or someone who looked exactly like me, standing motionless in the middle of the hallway, flashlight off, facing the camera. The real me was home asleep by then. I'd clocked out at 1:58. The video ran for 30 seconds. Then the figure raised a hand and waved, slow, deliberate, before walking out of frame. I told him it had to be doctored. A prank, a software error, something. He just stared at me and said that there was no remote access on that system, and nobody came in after I left. The motion sensors would have caught it. I quit that night, but before I left, I took one last look at the monitors. All the zones were clear except one. Zone 9, the loading bay again. A single figure stood under the flickering light, back turned to the camera, flashlight in hand. The feed glitched for half a second, and when it cleared, he was facing the lens. And this time he smiled, not the usual human laugh, but something devilish, teeth too wide and sharp. It didn't look human, not at all. Story number 9. Night shifts at gas stations have a rhythm. The hum of coolers, the buzz of the fluorescent sign, and the occasional car that pulls in just to remind you you're not the last person on earth. I used to find that rhythm comforting. Now it sounds more like a heartbeat I can't turn off. I've been running the midnight shift at an old roadside gas station for about 4 years. Small place, 2 pumps, 1 flickering light over the lot. You could drive right past it and never notice unless you needed caffeine or cigarettes. It's quiet most nights. Truckers, night owls, the occasional lost tourist. You get to know the regulars by their headlights before you ever see their faces. But one customer, I only saw him on the security feed. It was late January, a slow night, rain coming down sideways, wind rattling the ice chest outside. Around 2:33 a.m., I was half asleep behind the counter when I heard the ding of the door chime. I looked up. Nobody there, but the bell had definitely rung. I checked the parking lot through the window. No car, no movement. The only sound was rain hitting the awning. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement on the counter. A can of coffee and a pack of mints sat there, like someone had just placed them down. I stared at them for a full minute, waiting for someone to step out from an aisle. Nothing. I finally muttered, telling whoever it was to stop with the prank, but my voice sounded too loud in the empty room. Then the card reader beeped. The screen flashed. Payment approved. A printed receipt slid out from the till. I picked it up. The time, 2:33 a.m. The items, black coffee, peppermint minis. Payment type, credit, ending 7092. But there was no one on the camera feed. I rewound the footage. It showed the door open, the bell ring, the counter empty. The items appeared out of thin air. One frame they weren't there, the next they were. And the weirdest part, the door didn't even show rain blowing in, like it hadn't opened at all. I bagged the stuff, put it aside and tried to shake it off. Probably a system glitch, right? Maybe someone prepaid somehow or double swiped earlier. Still, the receipt bothered me. The next night, same time, 2:33 a.m., the bell rang again. This time I was ready. I stared straight at the door. No one came in, but the items showed up again. Same brand of coffee, same pack of mints. The register processed the payment automatically. Same card ending, 7092. That's when I knew it wasn't a glitch. The register was offline. Our internet had gone down during a storm. No way a card could process. I kept the receipt. The next morning, curiosity got the better of me. I called the bank listed on the payment line just to see if the card was real. The woman on the phone sounded confused. She told me that the owner had died 10 years ago in a car accident, and the card was destroyed in the crash. I felt something cold slide through my gut. I thanked her and hung up. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the phone. I pulled up the old local news archives that night before work. There it was, February 2015, fiery crash near mile marker 42. Single vehicle driver trapped. The photo showed twisted metal illuminated by my gas station sign in the background. That's when I realized my shift starts at midnight and the accident had happened around 2:30 a.m., the same time the phantom customer came through. I should have quit then, but curiosity is a stupid thing. It makes you want to see how deep the hole goes. So the next night, I set up my phone camera behind the counter, aimed right at the door. I synced the time with the register. At 2:32, nothing. At 2:33, the bell chimed again. The door stayed closed, but the sound of wet shoes squeaking came from the floor in front of me. Slow, deliberate steps. A can of coffee thunked onto the counter, then the mints. The register beeped. Payment approved. I could see my breath fogging in front of me. The temperature had dropped sharply in seconds. Then came the smell. Not rain, not oil. Burnt rubber. Acrid and sharp, filling my nose and throat. My phone's camera kept recording, the clock ticking steadily. The air crackled for a moment, like static, and I heard it. A faint voice, male, tired, distant. Then the door chime sounded again, and the smell was gone. The items sat neatly on the counter, receipt curling from the till. I replayed the footage when my shift ended. There was nothing there. No items appearing, no chime sound, no voice. The video froze completely from 2:32 to 2:33. Just a blank gap, like time itself skipped. And that morning I drove to the memorial site off Route 17. The cross was still there, covered in rust, with faded flowers around it. Since then, I've kept the receipts. There are 7 of them now, all time-stamped 2:33 a.m., all paid with the same card number. The ink fades fast, faster than normal paper should. Sometimes I wonder if I'm helping him, if the ritual of that purchase keeps something calm, contained. Or maybe it's just looping, the same unfinished stop replaying itself every night. Last week, though, something changed. When the register printed the receipt, there was a message across the bottom, right where the barcode usually prints. Pump 2. I went outside, flashlight shaking. Pump 2 stood in the drizzle, handle hanging loose. And then I saw it. Fresh skid marks across the wet asphalt, stopping right at the curb. The air smelled like burnt rubber again, and under the pump light's flicker, a new coffee can sat on the ground. Steaming. No one's touched Pump 2 since, but every night at 2:33, I still hear the faint squeak of wet shoes and the quiet beep of a card reader accepting payment from a man who should have burned with his car 10 years ago.